Welcome to the Imperfect Dads Podcast. This is your host, Devin. We believe dads care deeply about their family and kids, but they don't always have a space to discuss what their life looks like. Our podcast is a space for dads to discuss the ups and downs of fatherhood and how they feel like they're holding it together or how they're not. Thank you for joining us for this episode. This podcast is part of the Never a Face Network. Make sure to follow them on Instagram or go to the website neverafacenetwork.com. On this episode, we have an author, journalist, and podcaster, Jordan Ritter Conn. Jordan recently wrote a book called American Men, which came out on April 21st. He also did a podcast series called Sonic Boom about the Seattle Sonicsleaving Seattle. We talked about when a 2-year-old critiques your storytelling ability, a shared love of storytelling, wanting your kid to be kind, being excited to watch them learn about the world, being a sports writer for The Ringer, and the empathy required to be a journalist and tell people's story. Jordan's book, American Men, follows the story of 4 men and how they all experience masculinity. Jordan talked about how he wrote the book, what went into writing it, and why he thinks the exploration of masculinity is important for the current time. Make sure to go to his website, jordanritterconn.com, to find his book, and the link will be in the show notes. Just like one more thing.
Dad, just start the episode.
Oh, my bad. Hey, Jordan. Welcome to an episode of The Imperfect Dads. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Devin. Thrilled to be here.
Of course. So, okay, here's what I was going to tell you. So your new book, American Men, which once again, thank you for sending me a copy of it. I meant to start reading it last week, but it was spring break for my kids last week. So every single time I sat down, I either got asked to do something else or mentally I was like, I don't want to.
I just need to turn my brain all the way off for these few moments of peace. Totally get it.
Totally. Yeah. Or like, can I watch a show? Like, cause like it's funny to get to like the end of the day and like I am going to read your book. I'm going to listen to it also. And I didn't start it because I'm like, no, I want to actually be present for this. I actually want to pay attention and know what's happening here. And dude, sometimes I don't know if you've had spring break yet, but like, yeah, it's me not me versus, it's me with 3 kids some days. So like by the end of the day, I've been meeting needs like every single second of the day. So then it's like, do something for yourself. And you're like, my inertia, it's all over here. So
Absolutely.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, I've only got one.
Okay.
And he's 2.5, and even with just one, I feel that sense of you're on all the way on, and then the moment you turn it off, it's like I need to be turned all the way off, and so it's like I need to read a lot for my work, obviously, and I try to get it done mostly in the evenings, and that time of day, it's just like right now I'm reading a book that. It's a really nice book that I'm supposed to be writing a blurb for, and it's like getting myself to spend the like hour plus of like deep reading that is required to do that well is almost impossible. But
Yeah.
It's I think letting ourselves off the hook for those sorts of things is important.
Yes. Well, I think where the real exhaustion and frustration comes in is like, I know I can pick up on nuance. I know I can pick up on depth. Sometimes. And that's what drives me crazy is like, oh man, normally I feel like if I listen to an album, I can hear stuff in the mix. I can blah, 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 or like hear links to their previous version of themselves if it's a band I've listened to for like 20 years. And then I'm hearing them just like, tell me what the lyrics to the chorus were. And I'm like, that's a hard question, man. Don't do that to me.
But yeah, when you know your brain has the capacity for engaging with a piece of art on a really deep level, not being able to muster up that mental energy is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. How do you like have it? Do you say your son is 2.5?
He is.
Is he in full storytelling mode yet?
It's kind of a hybrid situation where he wants you to tell him the stories, but then he dictates how the story should be going as you were talking.
Yep.
And when you try to hand over the reins, when you try to go, like, oh, would you like to tell me this story? I'd love to listen. No. Just tell it. Like,
no.
The bunnies go this way. The bunnies are racing Lightning McQueen now. I need you to, paint a picture of a world for me in which bunnies and cars are friends and they go race together. But you've got a dad. So yeah, I mean he's all in on like kind of storytelling as a form, and just still wants to be like part participant, but largely listener. And we'll occasionally tell stories from his day, and And that's fun to see, like watching his brain kind of work to try to like figure out how do I piece together this sentence,
Yeah.
or how do I describe this thing that happened? How do I like bring in all of the characters from my life at preschool
Yeah.
who were there? And yeah, watching those muscles kind of grow day by day is really cool.
Yeah. My son who's 4, so I have a 10-year-old daughter, 8-year-old daughter, and 4-year-old son. And it's hilarious to me because my 4-year-old son is already snarky, or he'll like make up a word or be like, "Oh, that's Budaba." And I'm like, "What's Budaba?" And he's like, "Budaba is Budaba." And I'm just like,
Yeah.
"You jerk. I'm actually trying to learn about your life here. Come on, man."
Yeah, yeah. Same with my 2.5 year. The other night I told him a story again about he wanted a story about bunnies, and he made up a name of a bunny that was like it sounded like spanakopita, like the
Mhm.
Greek dish, but it's
Yeah,
like
those are delicious. I'd love some. Thank
Mali
you.
Panacopola or something like that.
Yeah.
And it just some utter nonsense name. And then he
Yeah.
insisted that I pronounce it correctly as he had said it
Fantastic.
time and time again. And then the next morning, my wife asked him what stories he'd heard last night when I was putting him to bed.
Yeah.
And I was kind of explaining that there had been 2 stories about these bunnies, and it was like one of them, like, there's no way, I have no memory of what the name was, and I guarantee you he doesn't remember it either. And he goes,
Yeah.
"Oh no, it's," and then whatever nonsense word, Salapanatopica,
Yes.
again, again, and again, and again. So yeah, it's the like finding humor and absurdity, like it seems like something that comes like very, very early. Like it's the
Mhm.
earliest form of humor that we can kind of recognize in a lot of ways, just something that is like so far out of the norm of human
Mhm.
communication.
Yep.
And he clearly latches onto that and loves it.
Yeah. Well, I know it's because I value like humor. Because to me, like laughter is like the great equalizer. Like it makes everyone. It's a very communal thing to laugh with people, and I think it's funny to watch. Like you don't realize what you value in life. I feel like until you have a kid, and then you see what your kid like naturally does, and you're like, oh, I probably taught them that. Oh, I must really care about laughter. I must really care about storytelling and nonsense because this kid is full of storytelling and nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That what you said about like you realize what matters to you
Yeah.
is really interesting because I write about sports a lot.
Hmm.
And I'm a big sports fan, always have been. I used to work at ESPN, and I imagined that when I became a dad, like the impulse to like get a child like really into sports as well would be really, really strong. And obviously my son is still really young, but
Hmm.
I have found some just in our kind of little interactions with with playing basketball or soccer or
Yeah.
whatever else that I'm it kind of surprises me the degree to which I don't really care that much if he picks it up. But
Yeah.
then there are things like like I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and like wanting him to kind of connect with that form of art is something that really, really matters to me. Like watching him, like we introduced him to the show Daniel Tiger not too long
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what was happening in the episode, but it was like something on the show, as that show often does, that is like taking this thing that is already happening in a 2, 3, 4, 5 year old's life
Hmm.
and kind of dramatizing it. And like maybe it was like Daniel Tiger had a babysitter or
Hmm.
something like that. And like sitting there watching him watch this character on screen go through a thing that he has gone through and start to experience some of the emotions that he has experienced, like a little bit of fear, and then slowly a little bit of anxiousness, and over time like confidence and courage. And he was like sitting on the couch, like really, really moved by it.
Hmm.
Like had like tears in his eyes. And I'm like, I'm watching my 2.5 year old cry, not because he's upset, not because he's
Yeah.
out of control, but because he is like watching something of his own experience reflected back
Hmm.
to him. And like, I don't know, it was like really, really moving to me. And I think kind of speaks to like, I find myself like wanting that for him, wanting him to kind of connect with story in that way, because it means so much to me.
Yeah. Totally. I think like if you were to ask me, like to me, like music or art is like my first language, kind of because it does. Like I think a good song, a good story takes a feeling that you have, an experience that you have that you had no idea how to communicate, and then it gives
Yeah.
you the words for it. It gives you the language for it. So whenever you see that for your kids to be like, I mean, yeah, why do I love Inside Out 1 and 2 so much? It's because I have daughters. And I can look
Mm,
at them and be like, hey, which of these emotions are you feeling? Which is also probably overused as an example. But still, like it, I mean, like no one, when we were kids growing up, I mean, in the second Inside Out, Inside or Inside Out 2, Riley has a panic attack. I know people had panic attacks whenever they were
Mhm.
13 or 12. No one knew it. No one called it a panic attack, but
Sure,
it's what was
sure.
happening is you were overwhelmed, overstimulated, and you didn't know the next step. So like I love art for that reason because it does allow you to connect with your kids. It allows your kids to see themselves and to look outside themselves. And like to see outside yourselves and find a way to connect with other people is like the most beautiful human thing you can be.
Yeah, yeah, it's this combination of seeing some small piece of yourself reflected back to you, and but seeing that in someone who is different from you. And
Yeah.
so, I think it becomes like kind of an empathy builder, because you
Hmm.
see that this person who in many ways might look very, very different from me, their experience might be different from mine. They might walk, talk, live in ways that are unrecognizable to me. But there's this one little thing, this
Hmm.
one little way, even if it's just an emotion that they felt, that is a lot like what I've experienced in my own life. And so, I think about like myself as a kid, and art, storytelling was
Yeah.
such a huge part of kind of how I like expanded my sense of the world.
Hmm.
And it was through that, through seeing the ways in which I have these small pieces of commonality with people who are in so many ways quite different from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you study like journalism, English? What'd you study in college?
I did. So I knew I wanted to be a writer from the time I was about 12 years old. And I kind of found my way quickly toward wanting to pursue journalism
Hmm.
and when I was in high school. And I started writing online. This was in like the very early 2000s. I graduated high school in 2003. So like
Okay.
99, 2000, 2001. I started writing
Yeah.
online for these, long defunct websites about sports.
Yeah.
Where, like I had an editor. My editor was probably, I was a 13, 14-year-old kid. My editor was probably a 17-year-old kid somewhere else. I have no
Hmm.
idea who he was.
Yeah.
And I would just write like my takes about college football or the NBA or whatever. And then when I got to college, I pursued that pretty single mindedly. I went to this small conservative Christian university called Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee,
Hmm.
and was the editor of the paper there, and then kind of started working at the newspaper there, the Chattanooga Times Free Press. And then after that, I went to graduate school at
Okay.
UC Berkeley, which
Oh,
is a
cool.
vastly different experience
Wait a
from my
second.
undergrad experience. Yeah. uh
Cleveland, Tennessee is real small. It's just like real tiny, real cute. I like it's great. But UC Berkeley's a little different. A little
yeah,
different.
yeah, like and culturally the complete and total opposite.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that was kind of what I wanted, like not that not that I didn't enjoy my experience at Lee, but I wanted to have an experience that was totally different in every conceivable way, that was thousands
Yep.
of miles away from home,
Yeah.
that was in a culture that was unlike any culture I'd been a part of before, and that it was at a big school, and a school with kind of a pretty rigorous reputation.
Hmm.
And that was kind of going to grad school there was kind of the launching point for kind of my career. And
That's cool. Yeah, that's I think I grew up in the Midwest and like I don't know, I feel like what's the best way to put it? It's always fun to talk about like when you come from like a smaller area and you want to know more than your small town without being condescending or disrespectful to what you came from. It's always an interesting balance because like whatever I define the world as, I know is just that. It's my definition of the world. So I know whatever I think, how I think things work, there's always more to it than that. So I want to be able to put myself in a position to be curious, be empathetic, and learn what other definitions of existence there are, but without being condescending and rude to what I came from. Because, like, yeah, I haven't lived in my hometown for since I graduated high school, so 2006. So like
yeah,
that's not what I want. I don't want to live there. But I know lots of people, my parents live there. Like it's a good life, it's a fine life. It's just not what I want. So figuring out the like when you know your ecosystem, but also you want more. It's such a fascinating balance of ego and curiosity and empathy all at the same time.
yeah, and I grew up in the Atlanta area, in the suburbs.
Okay.
But then going to college in this small town, and in a particular kind of religious setting. I mean,
Hmm.
Lee is a Pentecostal college, so like and that was kind of my family's background was tied to
Yeah.
kind of Pentecostal Christianity. I knew I wanted to experience something pretty far outside of that.
Yeah.
And so was in California for 5 years, and then my wife's from Alabama, from the Birmingham area, and so came back to Nashville just to be in the South near family, but also
Yeah.
to be in a big city. But I for my job as a journalist, I travel a lot, and I go to some places that are I go to some big exciting cities. I also go to places like Ardmore, Oklahoma for a week, or
Yeah.
Potsdam, New York, which is way
Yeah.
up on the Canadian border. I spend some time in some places that are pretty far off the beaten path. And I just find everywhere I go fascinating. Like everywhere you go, there are interesting people. Everywhere you go, there is a kind of texture to the culture that is like just a little bit unlike anywhere else, while also being like kind of the same. Like at this point,
Yeah.
and at least in America, like every town has like the one fancy restaurant and cocktail bar or whatever. Like it's there are ways in which everywhere is kind of the same, but there's also just like a slightly different texture to anywhere that you can go. And I find it fascinating to kind of travel through, spend a lot of time in rural America. That's where a lot of my family grew up, in like Dalton, Georgia, Cleveland, Tennessee. And I love those places because, like anywhere, they're fascinating and full of interesting people.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating to think of like one of my summer jobs was at AmeriQual, which does MREs, like meals ready to eat. And like I'm so fascinated to think of like that's someone's like entire adult life is going to that job, working it every single day. And like that's like there's so many untold stories in like factories, things like that in smaller areas of America that are very easy to overlook. And like, but it still has the same humanity that all of us experience every single day. It's just such a small scale that people don't focus on it. And I'm very fascinated by that because that's, I don't know, just interesting. I also have the same curiosity of me. Like, yeah, put me in any city. Let me go to a local diner and talk to people and just what's your existence here? Because there's good and there's something I know I can relate to you on. So how do I find what our common ground is?
Yeah, yeah. This book, one of the guys who's in the book is, his name's Nate, and
Mhm.
he is a trans man from Youngstown, Ohio.
Yeah.
And, Youngstown is kind of Rust Belt's, a place
Yeah.
that used to have a lot of steel, a lot of industry. And that part of the economy has been in decline for a long time. But it's a place that is like very much associated with um, a certain kind of work, and therefore a certain kind of culture that accompanies that work.
Yes.
And finding this man who lives there, grew up there, loves it there,
Yeah.
in many ways, who is transgender, and does not kind of fit the like typical images kind of
Mhm.
trans lives
Yeah.
that we see. But they're trans people, queer people, absolutely everywhere. That there are people in all kinds of communities that go against what kind of like common expectations are of what the population of a place like a Youngstown, Ohio, or a Cleveland, Tennessee
Hmm.
is going to be. And one of the things that I love most about his story is how rooted he feels to that town, to that community,
Yeah.
despite the
Yeah.
fact that it's in this a red state. It's in a state with a government that is consistently passing laws that are
Hmm.
harmful to
Yeah.
him and
Yeah.
others like him. But it's a place where he's found a lot of love, a lot of acceptance. And I don't know, I just found myself kind of compelled by that piece of his
Yeah.
story. And I think you find stories like that anywhere you go.
Yeah. Did you ever watch We're Here, like the HBO show?
I don't think I did. No.
Okay, so it
Tell me
was
about it.
three drag queens. It was Shangela, Bob the drag queen, and I can't think of the third one. My mom's going to be so disappointed in me. But basically, they would go to small towns in America and put on a drag show. And they would find drag queens in the area, and they would basically highlight that exists in small town America.
Yeah.
Because I actually went to my hometown in Evansville and did
Oh
it.
wow. Oh wow.
Yes. But yeah, because it is a fascinating story of whenever you are rooted and whenever you feel connected to something, but you know that ecosystem isn't like you could find a better ecosystem, you could find better soil is a fascinating story. Because yeah, like she could or he, sorry, I'll have to rephrase that so I can edit that. He would be able to find a probably more community for himself in a bigger city, in a city that is more liberal and all of that. But he feels so compelled to stay in Youngstown that he can't leave. And that whole thing is like, but don't you know this soil is better for you? Don't you know this would bring more joy to you? But for him still to be like, no, this is my place is like that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. While I was there, on one of the trips I took to spend time with him. I went out to dinner one night at an Italian restaurant. There's incredible Italian food in Youngstown, Ohio, by the way.
Good to know. Okay.
And apparently, it used to be a huge mafia city. I had no idea, but I heard some interesting stories about the mob while I was in town. But one night, I'm out at dinner, sitting by myself at the bar of this Italian restaurant, and there's a couple next to me that kind of starts, strikes up a conversation, and that we're talking a bit about like my travels, and they're kind of telling me about Youngstown and about why they love it so much, and they've lived in these other places, but there's nothing quite like Youngstown. It's this incredible community. And then we're having this great warm back and forth kind of conversation. And then at one point the man says to me, he talks about a bit that he saw on Bill Maher's show. And I have not gone and found this clip, so this is just secondhand from this man telling me the story. But where Bill Maher is making some joke about how right now at dinner in San Francisco there's a teenage kid who is saying something to his parents about like, I know you see me as a girl, but I'm actually a boy. And he says, you know where that's not happening? Youngstown, Ohio. And the guy tells me this story as if it's like this kind of, as if like people understand that Youngstown is somehow different and better than places like a San Francisco, because this sort of thing would not happen here.
Yeah.
And I say to him, well, actually the reason I am here is because I am writing this book that includes the story of this guy who is a transgender man from and living in Youngstown, Ohio. And the guy was kind of taken aback a little bit, and he was like, oh, well, I guess we just don't get into each other's business too much here. And then kind of moved on. And we were polite enough the rest of the dinner, I guess. But I don't know, that somehow that was emblematic to me of like, even people in communities like that can kind of have an idea of what the community is like that doesn't always fully accurately reflect it. But this guy Nate from my book, like he comes out to his mother. She's immediately accepting and loving. He comes out to his father, who has in many ways not been a great father to him. But when and is someone who is pretty macho and who you might expect to not be really accepting in this way. But he's immediately accepting and loving.
That's great.
And finding people in his community who have different political beliefs, who are wary of some of the things he says, but still want to kind of accept and love him. I do think that people want to care about the flesh and blood person who is standing in front of them. People want to understand their differences when it is someone who is actually in their lives, in their community. And I think he encountered that time and time again.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to hate anything from far enough away. But once you put yourself on the ground and actually like talk to the people at all, I mean, because like the I don't know. I mean, I don't want to take the conversation too far in this direction. The echo chambers you can create for yourself really scare me, because it is a person. It is like, I mean, you do sports writing. I would be fascinated to know on Twitter what type of responses you've gotten to your sports writing. But like, I know sports writers sometimes have to take out like legal action against people who do literal death threats against them. Whenever, like, because it's like, how dare you say that LeBron James isn't that good? And it's like, I'm just saying how he played in that game and he had a bad game. Well, I'm going to murder your family. And you're like, why would you say it? So like, we live in a world in which people feel comfortable saying, I'll murder your family because of your sports take. And it's like, if he was there in front of you, he wouldn't even, none of that would happen. So it's a weird time to live in which we are, I think there's a lot of energy to make it okay to hate people from far away and not realize you're actually talking to a human being. And that is really sad to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's social media flattens everything, flattens everyone. Turns people into, from a flesh and blood human being who you would encounter in a real and complicated way into a 2D figure on a screen. And I do feel like, again, to go back to parenting, I mean, like the thing that I hope to be able to foster the most in my son is just a desire to engage with real human beings who are directly in front of you and engage with them meaningfully. And, I was someone who, growing up had a lot of social anxiety. Like meeting new people really stressed me out. Being at like parties really stressed me out. Just any, I had plenty of friends. I would just like certain kind of social situations where it could be almost debilitating.
Yeah.
And, I'm an elder millennial, so I kind of came of age mostly in the 90s, early 2000s. And I think a lot about if I had grown up a bit later, how much the temptation to just kind of like be inside, be disconnected from real people and encountering people kind of through the safety of a screen would have appealed to me as
Yes.
someone who found the real world and real people a little bit scary sometimes.
Mhm.
But being pushed to kind of fight through that discomfort, being pushed to you know, be really anxious sometimes in a social setting and just kind of sit with it and
Yeah.
stick with it and find your way toward encountering another person in a real way was hugely, hugely important to me. And like, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to do the work I do as a journalist if not
Yeah.
for some of those experiences.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's, that's something that I obviously, I think as any parent in this particular moment in time does, I think about all of that a lot.
Yeah. I try to do like I think it's fascinating to also figure out what to positively reinforce for your kids, but also like as your son gets older. But also I always have the worry of if I positively reinforce it that my kid won't do it just because I told him good job for it. Like all of that energy.
Yeah.
Like the other day, my middle child, we were walking back to her house and from the bus stop, and like there's a trash can because it was trash day, and like the trash lid was flipped over, and she walked by and just like flipped it closed. Like if you walk by a mailbox, close it because you see it. And I want to be like, hey, good job. Like, way to look at your environment and be like, a decent person should do this. So trying to find that balance of like, be aware of your surroundings, be around the people around you, and like do a kind act if you have the ability to do a kind act. But
Yeah.
also, if I tell you that I'm proud of you for doing this, are you going to do it again? Or are you going to never do it again because I gave you my approval? Which one is it?
That's interesting. Probably really, really depends on the kid.
It does. And the moment
Yeah.
and what it was.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, for me as a kid, like there were times when I really craved that kind of approval. I think especially when I was really young, I
Yeah.
really craved that kind of approval. And as I got older, I kind of got a bit more defiant
Yeah. Of course.
as a teenager. And so yeah, I mean it's tough to kind of to kind of walk that line. But I just think trying to
Yeah.
foster a sense
Yeah.
of like being aware of the world around you
Yep.
and yeah, it is worthwhile.
I think my biggest fear as a parent, or one of my biggest fears as a parent, is the moments that I thought were big moments, my kids will think were little moments. And the moments my kids think are, like the reverse of that. What I think is big, they think
100%.
is little. It's like, oh man, was that the moment I should have said the extra thing? I think it's the low grade anxiety every parent lives with is, did I
Yeah.
step up to this moment the way I should have, or did I let it go because I didn't think it was that big of a deal?
And, I think the answer is inevitably like, yes, that will happen.
Yeah, well,
Like, yeah, it's just, it's part of what it's like to just be, I mean, the name of the
yeah.
show, imperfect,
Yep.
being an imperfect person, trying to, trying to do the best that you can and not always having an awareness of what a particular moment in a child's life is kind of laden with, like
Yep.
not knowing um what when they come to you and they don't even know what they need
Mm-hmm.
and they can't even articulate what's wrong. Sometimes it's hard for you to respond in the way that is exactly what they need because you don't
Yep.
even fully understand what's wrong.
Yep.
uh I have written a lot about write a lot about in this book about trauma
Yeah.
and traumatic events that people have been through in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So often, like the adults in the room don't even really understand what's happening. The adults in the room don't understand what the child needs because they don't know what the child has been through. And so I think that doesn't mean you don't try. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't really, really try to kind of be aware in those ways of everything that a child might be bringing with them to you in a given moment. But you are going to mess up inevitably. And I think that just kind of like, I think about a lot is just trying to like make the house feel like a place of kind of unconditional love and
Mm-hmm.
support
Yeah.
and making it feel as safe, making myself feel as safe of a person as I can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think people kind of return to that baseline. I think you see time and time again people who have real issues with some of the choices their parents made,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
who were failed by
Yeah.
their parents in
They
some
do.
real ways,
Yes.
who even through their parents' failures if they still feel like they had that sense of love and support and that sense that their parents were really, really trying to love them the best that they could, they kind of grow into an empathy for what their parents were going through and grow into a sense of like wanting deeper connection with them in adulthood.
Yeah. It's yeah, man. I think trying to create a safe household, a household in which people can feel safe, seen, and heard, and all that. I value a lot, or we value a lot. And it's what you have to then do though is be in tune with like your tone and your body language, like at all times. Which I think, on the discussion of masculinity, is such a different standard than the normal like masculine tone. Because to me, traditional masculinity is usually like alpha male energy. I guess is the best way now to put it, which is like you're in control, you take control, da 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 da. And like if you are creating an environment where people feel safe and loved, you are in control of that environment. You're just not dominating it. So it's
Yeah.
fascinating to learn what that actually looks like in your day to day life because it is, in my opinion, is very counter to what I expect a man to look like. So I feel like in my head, I'm like, oh, I should take control of this. And it's like, you are in control.
Yeah.
You're not dominating the energy. Do you need to
Yeah. Yeah.
dominate the energy? And it's like, not if I want the end result I want, me dominating this scenario is not going to get to the end goal I want.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, like having a sense of being decisive, being clear in kind of the choices you're making and the way that you're communicating.
Hmm.
And like again, I think kids respond to clarity. They respond to kind of like boundaries that are understood. And so I do think that like that there's a lot to be said for asserting a level of control, but I think control can just mean like decisiveness.
Yeah.
Just like moving with purpose and
Yes.
clarity.
Yep.
Not trying to like control an outcome,
Yeah.
but just kind of controlling how you were going to make the next choice.
Hmm.
What you bring up the word dominance. I feel like dominance is something that we often reach for when we feel a little bit out of control.
Hmm.
Like I'm like I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5",
Okay.
and I'm
Yeah.
not like the most, I'm not like the strongest person in the world, but like, I lift weights and played
Yeah.
sports
Yeah.
and stuff. And the moments in my life where have found myself wanting to like assert real dominance have been moments when I felt a little out of control, or moments when I felt a little like challenged in some way that kind of like bumped up against some like kind of wounded piece of myself. And so like I feel like grasping for dominance is a sign of someone who is not really kind of in command of themselves, not really in,
Yep.
in command of the situation, who is just kind of like flailing and trying to use whatever is at their disposal to make themselves feel powerful and make the other person feel small. And so that's like, if you're a person who has like you're in a position of authority, like you're a boss or
Hmm.
something else, or even
Yeah.
just as a parent, like you can kind of grasp for dominance because like it's a quick way to make you feel like you have some power.
It is.
If
It is.
you're someone who's prone to violence, like
Yep.
turning to violence is a quick way to
Yeah.
make yourself feel like you have power. But usually it comes from a place of feeling like pretty disempowered yourself.
Correct. Yeah. Or it's because you're so like you what's the best way to put this? You have so much belief in the outcome you're searching for will create something that's good that if anything starts to deter from that, you're like, no, we have to end up here. And the only way I know how to do it is to force you to do it now. And like, yeah, same. If I ever feel a need to dominate a room, dominate anything, it's because I don't trust anything. It's because of a deep lack of trust or belief that I'm going to get a need met or something like that. And I really need it to get met. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is what it is. I'm trying to be in a state where I'm not trying to categorize something as good or bad anymore. I'm trying to categorize as
Yeah.
like, okay, you walked into this room, you screamed at everyone. What need did you think that was going to meet? And I'm trying to not say
Yeah.
that in a condescending tone. You thought that this was the best way to get a need met because of whatever reason. And I'm not here to tell you did it right or did it wrong. I wouldn't have done what you did. But what was going on with you that day in which you thought this is how you would get a need met because you just destroyed everyone else's needs in the process of just looking out for yourself?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a really like so much of the conversation around parenting today, like this idea of like gentle parenting, and
Hmm.
which I haven't read a ton of like the literature on gentle parenting, but my
Yeah.
my understanding of it is that it's just simply like leading with empathy,
Yeah,
just
pretty
like
much.
going to a place of feeling empathy for
Yeah.
this person you're encountering who's your child before anything else. And I just feel like, I often come back to, as a journalist, the two things that I think are by far the most important things that a journalist can have are empathy and curiosity. And over the years, I've kind of taken that into like thinking about like just almost anyone. Like I know that there are other great qualities, but maybe it's just because I'm a journalist and I think about so much of the world in those terms.
Empathy and curiosity and kindness. I'll add kindness to this also.
Yeah,
if you can raise a
kindness
kid with those three things, you did something right, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I feel like kindness usually kind of follows
does.
from empathy and curiosity. And the empathy and curiosity are one and the same in a lot of ways, because like when you really want to know more about what a person is experiencing, that's going to take you to a place of empathy, and then you're likely going to act toward them with some measure of kindness. And so, in that way, I mean, obviously parenting is so much harder than this, but like that piece of it feels simple if you can just kind of remind yourself to come back to those things again and again.
Yeah. I think with gentle parenting, what's fascinating to me is because I do think it is focused on like learning where your kids' experiences is and how they process the world and stuff. But I feel like the thing that like I keep in mind with that is like, I'm still the parent. And there are still the moments which you're like, okay, cool. We just spent 20 minutes talking about this. Now we need an action. Now we need to go do something. And I feel like gentle parenting is portrayed as like, well, then you never like do the next step. And it's like, I am still the authority in the room. And I'm just trying to lead with kindness and giving my kids space. But at the end of the day, if I sign up for a ballet class and I need my girls to go to the ballet class, they might hate it. They might hate everything about it. I'm still going to make them go to that ballet class.
Yeah. And again, like I think kids want to know that you have that authority. Like they don't want
I think so too. Yeah.
Have total freedom. That's terrifying.
It is.
It's terrifying sometimes as an adult. Can you imagine
I don't like
being...
No, I don't like it. No.
3, 4, 5, 10, 13, 15 years old and feeling like you have absolute freedom? It's terrifying. And so they want to know that you are going to make the decisions. They even want to know that sometimes you are going to make decisions that they don't really like in the moment, because I think that contributes to kind of an atmosphere of safety. Just feeling like that there is someone else who is looking out for me. Even when things feel a little bit out of control and I don't quite know what to do with myself.
Yep. Well, because like I know a lot of people in which here they are as adults and they believe they have to be responsible for the answer to every question that gets asked. That if something happened, it's only because of them. And that is so lonely and so isolating. And I want my kids to know that we're on a journey together. We're figuring this out together. And like, I want them to, to some extent, it's like their experience. I want to know how they interpret it so I can help guide the answer. But like, I know people where it's like, well, I have to figure this out because no one else will if I don't. And I'm like, there's some truth there, but that's not the full story. And I don't want any of my kids to feel like the only way something can happen is because of them, because that's not a weight I don't think anyone should hold. You don't do nothing. You still have a part to play. It's a very delicate balance. But like, man, that just makes me horrible to think about if one of my kids is like, the only way I can get this done is if I'm in charge and I do it. And I'm like, no, I don't like that version of myself. So I don't want you to become that version of yourself.
Yeah. I feel like I keep taking the parenting discussion back to journalism and the journalism discussion back to parenting.
It's almost part of your life. It's okay.
But, it's that what you were just saying made me think of something in the journalism world that comes up a lot. And that's a number of journalists who, particularly young ones, but not always, who really feel the need to kind of like impress people with their questions.
Yes.
Who go into an interview or into a press conference and like view the asking of questions as like a chance to kind of show off. To show off their knowledge about whatever subject they're talking about or anything else. And like, again, in sports, like you'll see it all the time at press conferences where someone will just go on like a long like riff where they're like rattling off all these stats and this analysis. And then the question is just like, any thoughts, coach, at the end? And like, because it wasn't really about asking the coach question. It was about showing off how much you know.
Correct.
But like, that's not your job. Like your job as a journalist is to get the other person to say something interesting. And even if you look like an idiot in asking that question, like if the other person says something interesting, you have done your job. And I do feel like in the rest of life, like having that approach of like admitting what you don't know being curious about who around you might know and like how we can kind of find our way toward figuring this thing out, leads to a place that's a lot less frustrating and isolating for one, but also that's probably more likely to get you to a good answer
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And also, if you're asking questions, like I'm a big fan of figuring out a question to ask someone where they didn't expect to be asked that question today. So then they have to stop. Because if I'm like, how's your day? You already have like 3 responses canned that you're going to say. But also with that, you have to be present for the answer. Like I can tell if someone asks me a question, I'm like, you're already thinking about your next question. And I can tell that. And then I answer differently. If you're like, how's your day? And I'm like, oh, you're just waiting to talk about how your day is. Like, I'm just going to say fine. So we can get to what you want to talk about. Because I'm looking for connection here. And me being the main character right now isn't going to lead to connection. So you take that role for a bit and we'll come back to me later.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
My mom's a journalist. I'm very English heavy family. So like people's word choices, how they talk and stuff like that. I'm like, I think I can understand what you really want to find out from this. I need to not be a jerk. And here we go.
Yeah. And sometimes that's okay. And that's the best way forward is just to kind of let the person who needs to say the thing say whatever it is that they need to say.
Yep. Correct. Okay. Since we've already talked for like 42 minutes, I haven't done the blatant like, hey, Jordan, tell me about your book. Give me the sales pitch for your book. We've talked about your book. It's been interwoven into the conversation.
Sure.
Hey, Jordan, tell me about your book.
So American Men, which is by the time this podcast comes out, available anywhere books are sold. American Men is a work of narrative nonfiction that interweaves the stories of 4 men, all of whom have kind of a central complication in their life around their relationship to masculinity. And so it's really kind of an exploration of this very simple question with a very complicated answer of what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
And more than anything, it is 4 stories that I believe will keep you turning the pages. I tried to write it as these are like real life character studies of real people, but I wanted to write it with kind of the pacing and intensity of like a thriller, and to feel like kind of these real things that are going on in these kind of ordinary men's lives, have like kind of a drama and tension to them that make you really want to know what happens next. And so the 4 men range from, one is a gay man from a reservation in way upstate New York. He's from the Mohawk tribe. His name's Ryan, who is getting into a lot of bar fights. And it kind of follows him during this time in his life when he's kind of figuring out his sexuality, and he is wrestling with these really violent impulses that he has. And then another one is a man named Gideon, who is a West Point graduate, tall, handsome, smart, seems to typify every ideal that we expect from men. And until, his wife has an affair and his entire sense of kind of his own identity. Yeah. It's not so much about like, my wife cheated on me, she's terrible. It's more like, what does this represent about me that this has happened? I'm supposed to be the guy that's this would never happen to, and yet here I am. Another, the third man is named Joseph. He's someone who is, as an adult, kind of wrestling with the effects of pretty intense childhood trauma, and his marriage. He's in law school, and his marriage is kind of hanging on by a thread as he's kind of navigating in some pretty unhealthy ways the effects of kind of some traumatic experiences from his childhood. And then the fourth is Nate, who I feel like we spent a good amount of time talking about, the trans man from Youngstown, Ohio. Yeah. And so, it's their 4 stories interwoven. The chapters alternate. I think it'll keep you turning the pages. It's getting really great reviews. The New York Times just called it profound, which was really nice. And I'm excited to have it out in the world.
Nice. That's so cool. I think one thing that really fascinates me about life is we all use these common words every single day, but all of us define them so drastically differently. And every single example of those men they all have a relationship with masculinity. So I'm assuming you basically explore like, hey, what does this look like to you? As you're getting in a bar fight, as you are realizing that you need to change your relationship with your wife, what does that look like to you? I'm personally fascinated by, I don't know what's wrong with me, the concept of you build a life in this direction and then you realize everything you built for isn't really what you thought it would be. So then you have to start over. And I feel like that usually happens in your 30s. And that whole concept, I think, is just fascinating to me because I think that's like the midlife crisis in my head is, oh man, I worked for this. I went to West Point. I did all the things. It didn't lead me to happiness. Okay, cool. Right. So now I have to redefine not just masculinity, happiness, connection, everything in my life. And like, I don't know what's wrong with you, but that whole aspect of existence is just very human to me.
Yeah. And it just kind of redefining who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And I feel like I see pieces of myself in each of these four guys. But that character Gideon, the West Point graduate, like
Yeah.
he's someone who defines himself through achievement, defines
Yeah.
himself through the praise that has been kind of lavished on him from the time he was a very young child.
Yeah.
And for him, it was sports and just being recognized as special from a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was other things, but I felt like I became kind of addicted to that
Yeah.
as a kid, and it stuck with me into adulthood. But like trying, particularly in my 30s, I'm now 41, and feel like I've done a lot of work in this regard, but trying to kind of like get a sense of my own value as a human being outside of what I can achieve, what I can accomplish, how I can look impressive to other people.
Yeah.
I still feel that impulse. I still want to be impressive to other people. I still want to achieve things, but like realizing that I could achieve nothing, I could accomplish nothing, I could impress no one, and I can still be a person who has real value.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like to think of it as like, we all, whenever you enter into a room, you're all looking for what value add to that room. So you naturally go back to like, do you do like Enneagram? Do you know like Enneagram speak at
Yeah.
all? Okay. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an Enneagram 4, which means like,
Okay.
I will naturally gravitate towards wanting to feel special in whatever room I'm in. I want to give a unique take on whatever it is. And
I'm
now
a 3 with a
hopefully
4 wing.
that
So
makes
I
sense.
I get it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So is my wife. My wife is also a 3 with a 4 wing, in which she sprints constantly and then is like equally very aware of her emotions, but wants to achieve more than give into her emotions all at the same time.
Sure.
So
Totally get it.
I'm a very strong 4 with a 5, with a very strong 5 wing, meaning I feel a lot of things and I overanalyze everything that I feel at all times. But now, hopefully, as a mature adult, I realize like if I go into a room, I am going to assume I'm not valuable to that room unless I give a unique take to that room. Unless I'm unique to it, I'm special and I'm different than everyone in that room in some way. And now, hopefully, as a mature adult, I'm like, that's not true. Like, why would you think that that's the only way you're worth loving? Do you exist? You're worth loving. Similar
Yeah.
to you. You don't need to go into a room and be like, here's all my accomplishments. Like, Jordan, do you exist? Hell yeah, man, you're worth loving. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an incredibly difficult thing to believe about yourself.
It's very
for
simple
anyone.
sentence there for the most like decades of work, but yeah.
Yeah. But it is, and again, like going back to parenting, it's the thing you want to foster the most in kids is just this sense of their own value, and that their own
Yes.
value is intrinsic to who they are and not about what they do.
Correct.
And I think hopefully if you can foster that, it's something that sticks with a person for a very, very long time, even just as like the baseline, like the thing that they can return to as they feel all of those insecurities that we all inevitably feel, as they go through those crises we all inevitably encounter, to like have a baseline of I am a person with real value and worth, just because I exist.
Because you exist.
Yeah. It's a difficult but incredibly powerful thing to be able to foster.
Well, because you have to believe it in yourself. And that's what sucks, is that you do actually have to believe like, hey man, you're worth loving even if you don't achieve something. And you're like, today am I? Like, sure. In the future, right? Like not today, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then you have to embody that to your child of being like, hey, no, seriously, like, because I believe it, I'm now going to hopefully help you believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's
Easier said than done.
so much easier said than done. And I'm not trying to put therapists out of a job.
No. Yeah, that man, as a journalist, I make that very clear all the time, because as a journalist who writes about like trauma and painful things in people's lives, I sometimes have to make it clear, like, I am not a therapist. I cannot help you. I am here to ask you questions, and kind of help, maybe you'll make sense of your story a little bit better through talking to me, but I don't have any answers.
Yes.
They're professionals for that.
Right. Well, I also thought, just like glancing at your book and everything, I thought a fascinating detail of it I didn't get the sense that this is like your own personal journey with masculinity. This is just you learning, like being curious about like, man, there's a lot of shades to the definition of masculinity. How do I dive into this? Is that accurate to say? Because this does seem like your exploration of what masculinity means in the modern day. Now, like, I'm Jordan. Here's what I define as a man.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of my own experience in the introduction.
Yes.
The introduction draws from some personal experiences, but it's really like, again, the book is not like, I'm not here to give much in the way of answers. I'm not here to give advice. Like I am not here to even really like try to define masculinity. What I find more interesting is like seeing the ways that all of us define it and how
Right.
that impacts the shape of our lives. And so, yeah, I just felt like it was a recipe for, it'd be a recipe for a really boring book for someone to just kind of like give you all their takes
Yes.
on masculinity and what you should be as a man. There are plenty of podcasts out there for
There are.
that, for
Yep.
those who are
Yep.
interested. But I thought, yeah, the kind of book that I wanted to write is a book that is more about like kind of how we all kind of wrestle with these questions in our own lives.
Yep. Well, that's how I view like parenting. If you're like, what makes you a good parent? I'm like, that's actually a really deep personal journey of what makes you feel like you're within your integrity. And then it's like,
Mm.
I can't write a book about that. I can't do like a,
Right.
well, figure out
Right.
what matters to you and live into it. What does that mean? It means you need friends and community people to help you with it. But like, it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
easy to be drawn to like even like thinking about asking you questions for us. I'm like, well, I don't want to ask you, what do you define as masculinity? Because like, ultimately that's just a definition of masculinity, which is personal to you. But I feel like the whole essence of this book is, man, this definition is bigger than all of us.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
masculinity is based on your culture, your beliefs, your integrity, and that's going to change in every single city in America and every country in America. So lots to be
Yeah.
curious and empathetic towards.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, the word about masculinity that I always come back to is it's something that we inherit. It's
Yes.
something that is passed down to us.
Yep.
And who does the passing down can be our parents, but it's much more than that. It's also our culture. It's the world around us. It's our experiences in our formative years and in adulthood. And I think like our relationship to it is kind of defined by how we kind of navigate those ideas that we've inherited and how we do and do not measure up to them,
Yeah.
because we all are going to kind of define it, whether implicitly or explicitly in one
Hmm.
way or another. We're all going to kind of fall short of meeting that definition of what it means to be a man, at least in an ideal form, and how we kind of navigate that those moments when we do not measure up,
Yeah.
ultimately
Yeah.
kind of says something about who we are.
Yeah. Pretty much. One of my favorite, like, I think the moment where I started to like be more intrigued by what does masculinity mean? What is all this? What are like male initiation rites? Is I read Kurt Vonnegut a lot. Vonnegut's like one of my
Mm,
favorite authors.
yeah.
And he famously was a POW in Dresden. And whenever he got back, his uncle looked at him and said, "Well, now you're a man." And he's like, "How did any what? How did
Because I
I
suffered.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I shoveled dead bodies out of a
Yeah.
building while I was under like because I had been arrested basically by the enemy and like there's like so
Yeah.
how does this make me man?" I'm like, "Oh, in that scenario I would view someone who comes home from war something like oh, you must be a real man." And it's like, "No, if no,
Yeah,
don't do that."
yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, and again, in this book, one of the men, Joseph, the one who's kind of navigating trauma, he fought here, or he was in Iraq.
Yeah, yeah.
He was not in live combat, but in Iraq during the war, in some as a soldier, and in some
Mhm.
pretty rough and traumatizing
Yes.
moments, and his reflection on as well. I was just another guy who was over there. Like that's just we were
Mhm.
just 18, 19, 20-year-old kids
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
got shipped off to be in this war. There wasn't anything different about us and the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who were back home. We just happened to be the ones who were there.
Yeah.
Um, I think it can be kind of intoxicating to kind of latch on to certain experiences, making a man out of you.
Mhm.
But I think when you maybe go through those experiences, start to define yourself as now like having typified some ideal of masculinity, when you inevitably fail at
Yeah.
some point in the future, that's going to kind of rock your world
Yeah.
in a major way.
Yeah. Did you just make a slight Mulan reference there, by the way?
Not knowingly, the song "I'll Make a Man Out of You." I've actually never seen Mulan, but my wife quotes
Yes.
that song all the
Okay.
time.
Okay. Okay. Just sorry, you just like
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't think he knows that he's quoting the hit Mulan song from that from that Disney film.
I did not register until
Did
after
not
you
understand.
said it,
Okay,
but
cool,
yeah,
cool, cool, cool. No, I think it's I think the whole discussion of masculinity is one that fascinates me. I love that it's being discussed so much right now. I also prefer the books in which do it from an objective point or from a not objective from a curious standpoint because I think there are a lot of people who benefit financially and from kind of cult like honestly to tell you what masculinity is. To look at you and be
hmm,
like, this is what a man is, and if you follow me, I'll teach you how to be a man. And like honestly, man, like, whenever I had a kid, I had to redefine what that masculinity was. I'm currently
of
a stay at
course,
home parent. Whenever I became a stay at home parent, I had to redefine what masculinity
of
was for
course,
me.
yeah,
It is not I think in America or Western culture, we are too eager to set the definition and walk away. And I don't know of anything in life in which I set the definition and walk away, and that's reality in any way.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a boring way to live.
It is. It's
Why
controlled. It's
feel
very controlled, though. You've dominated the
sure.
situation, though. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
but then I don't want to be around you. I don't like you.
Yeah, yeah. I think like being open to new experience, being open to having your perspective changed, being open to your sense of yourself changing makes for a life that is much more interesting and I think enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think so too. Okay. I'm going to wrap up by asking you 5 questions. That's how I
Okay.
end every episode. So, first question is, did you have any backup names for your son? Did you have anything you almost named him?
No, but I will say we did not know the sex until he was
Yeah.
born.
Yeah.
And we were going to name him Noah either way.
Oh, cool.
So if he was a girl, it was going to be a girl named Noah.
Nice.
N-O-A would have been the spelling. There is
Yeah.
a Noah in the Bible. My wife's a religious studies professor at Belmont.
Okay, cool.
And so yeah, we had a in a sense a backup, and that if he'd been a girl, we would have given him the same name.
Nice. That's awesome. As someone who took religious classes at Belmont, that's very fun and how weird intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question. Who's your like favorite TV, movie, like book character?
Probably, I mean, Coach Taylor from Friday Night Lights
Yeah,
is
that's solid. That's solid.
just.
Yep.
I would imagine that's an answer many people have given on the show, but
Yep.
he's the first that jumps to mind. And I mean,
Yeah.
you just think of someone who is like, it goes back to that sense of like kind of being able to kind of be decisive, be clear, move with purpose, but not be controlling or
Yes.
like kind of walk that line pretty well and know when he's kind of like veering over it and know how to step back.
Yeah.
And who genuinely loves and cares for not only for his daughter, but also for all of the young people around him.
Yes.
He's the best.
Normally, the follow-up sentiment with that is also that he tries to be a good husband at the same time, and how much of
Yeah.
like himself he gives to like his entire community, because he is trying to be
Yeah.
someone. He's trying to like be a moral compass for like an entire town as a freaking
Yeah.
football coach. Like that's
Just
ridiculous.
a ton of pressure. Yeah.
Ton of pressure.
But yeah, he I mean, he takes on maybe more than he should at times, but he does it with, from a place of real kind of love and care for the people around him.
Next question. You might not have one yet because your son is young. Do you have a replacement curse word yet? Or do you just say the curse word still?
We mostly just say the words.
Yeah.
We try to censor ourselves and I think do a decent job. And the couple of times when I have said a curse word and he has repeated it, I just act like nothing happened.
Yeah.
I just kind of keep it moving. So he does not like get in his head that is a word that gets a reaction.
Yep.
And like I act like I misspoke or something, and we just kind of move on to the next thing. But yeah, we should probably come up with some replacement words.
Probably. But you know what? Until you get the call from the teacher or the principal of the pre-K or whatever, then like just keep on keeping on.
Yeah. I got suspended for cursing in school when I was in elementary school, and my mother was my principal, and I had to sit in my mom's office all day.
What did you think? That's also such like phenomenal like defiance of like, I don't effing care, and I'm just gonna go see my effing mom who's gonna be effing mad at me, no effing what, and being like F it. You're like, dude, Jordan, just don't do it. Just you're not making life easier for anyone. Stop it.
She suspended me multiple times, and she was pretty trigger happy when it came to suspending her firstborn son. I think that the standards for me were a bit stricter than they were for every other kid. But that's all right.
Like a firstborn child, by the way.
I mean, it's usually the case, right?
It sadly is. It very much is, because the firstborn you're like, dude, what have I done? And then by like the second or third, you're like, you'll live. You'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you need standards? You'll be fine. That's awesome. Next question. What's like one of your favorite activities or toys that you play with your son?
Man, he is. I mean, this is more speaking to his favorite than my favorite, but my enjoyment comes from. He is just obsessed with the Pixar Cars universe.
Dude, yes.
To a degree that like we have, I mean, he hasn't even seen the movies like that many times, but we have this book that names every single one of the characters,
Oh,
including the ones that
yeah.
like barely ever show up.
Yep.
And he has like the entire thing almost memorized
Yeah.
and is constantly wanting me to like act out skits pretending to be different characters from the Cars universe.
Yeah.
The Italian race car in Cars 2, Francesco Bernoulli.
Yeah. Oh,
I,
gosh.
I will not I will not torture you with my Italian accent, but
Not
at,
yet.
at home I am speaking in that Italian accent as Francesco Bernoulli on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and yeah, it goes back to the kind of storytelling thing that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier. Like it's kind of making up scenarios, making up stories. Him getting involved in that is a lot.
I think the second Cars movie is like my least favorite Pixar film. I don't remember
That
like
is the consensus.
it's hard, man. It's brutal. I don't remember A Bug's Life like at all as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen all that many of them, in part because once he discovered Cars, Cars is all
Yeah.
he ever wanted to watch.
What else is
But
there?
a lot of people don't like Cars too. I don't mind it. It is, I will say, it's shockingly violent.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's a torture scene in Cars
There's a torture
2.
scene. Yes.
He like doesn't really understand what's happening when we watch it, but
Yeah.
at some point we're probably going to have to, maybe consider skipping over it. But there's a lot of gunfire. There's some
Yeah.
actual torture happening. It's a spy flick. It's like
Yeah, it's a
Mission
spy flick.
Impossible
Yeah.
in the Cars world.
Yeah.
I don't mind it, but that is definitely, I've heard from a lot of people that they are not fans of Cars 2.
I think kids stuff is hilarious to me, like movies and whatnot, because like regardless if you like Cars 2 or not, you're stuck with it. So like you
Yeah.
better learn how to like it a little bit
Absolutely.
because you're gonna watch it 3 times today. So
Absolutely.
you better enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, he's got to see Francesco Bernoulli again.
always. And then that leads to naturally the last question I'll ask you is, what's your least favorite kid show or movie? Like if your son wants to watch it, or if you had like a niece or nephew who watched it all the time, and you're like,
Yeah.
this show is crap. What is this?
Yeah. We have avoided a lot of the really bad ones,
Well done.
unfortunately.
Well done.
I have come across Blippi before in another person's home,
Yeah.
and I've resolved that my child will go as long as possible without ever knowing who Blippi is.
Yeah.
Again, the 30 seconds passing through a room that I was
Mhm.
exposed were 30 seconds too many. So I guess that would be my answer. Although, we try to like, again, and I think it's a lot easier when you've only got one. Like we're able to kind of mostly, if he's watching something, we're there with him. We don't have to kind
Yeah.
of like just sit him down while we can like get some other stuff done or tend to the
Yeah.
other kids. So we kind of have a lot of say over like only watching things that don't make us want to bang our head against the wall.
Yep.
So yeah, so far we've been able to manage mostly the non-annoying
Yes.
ones.
I have found whenever kids start having like sleepovers or parties at other people's houses, that's whenever like more of those shows get introduced. Where like
Yeah.
there's a Disney show called Jessie that I was never that much of a fan of. But one of my daughters went over to someone's house and they watched it for like an hour there. So she came back home and was like, "Why don't watch Jessie?" And I was like, "I don't want to
That's
watch this
tough.
show."
Yeah.
And then she was like, "It's on Disney Plus," and I'm like, "Well, you and I both know that we have Disney. I can't lie to you about this." Like, and also like, it's not that bad. I just don't like it. And that's also a
Sure,
weird thing to
sure.
communicate to your kids of like, I know this brings you joy, but I hate this. It's not also like a
Dad is not having a good time while this is on the TV.
that's whenever if they're like, if I pull out a book or start reading or I'm on my phone the entire time, I'm like, no. You know what this deal is. You get to
Yeah.
watch this show. I get to ignore that this show exists.
I think that's fair. Have a little empathy and curiosity about your dad's experience while you're
Exactly.
watching
Come on,
Jessie.
child. And then last thing for you is just moment for like self-promotion, like Instagram. Where can we find your writings? Where can we find the book? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So the book, again, American Men, is available by the time this podcast comes out, anywhere books are sold. And my Instagram is at Jordan Ritter Conn, JordanRitterConn. And you can also I send out a newsletter through Substack. It's just my name, jordanritterconn.substack.com. It's mostly just kind of updates on my work. And my day job is I write for The Ringer. So if you go to theringer.com, you'll find my stuff there along with all of our other amazing writers and podcasters.
Nice. Well, I think that was so. Here's the real thing I think is successful of this interview or of this call so far. We didn't tangent on sports for too long. I feel like that could have been a whole 2-hour thing.
Absolutely.
And now knowing that you went to college in Cleveland, Tennessee, and then went to California, I have multiple questions on how is your deconstruction? How's your faith? How's your religion?
Sure.
But that's probably a different episode.
Yeah, we'll
And
save that for another podcast.
right. I find that so fascinating to me because like the more I deconstructed, the more empathetic and curious I've become about the people around me. And to me,
Yeah.
like the essence of Christianity is actually empathy and curiosity. So that balance
Yeah.
is one that's fascinating to me. So just as a heads up, as like a personal level of like that whole journey of, man, I was told this is how you love people. And it's like telling people they're going to burn in hell unless they believe exactly what we believe isn't love.
Yeah, yeah. It's tough.
It is.
It's funny, again, my wife is a religion professor at Belmont, and so she's kind of on the front lines of
Yeah.
watching students have their entire world get rocked
Mhm. Yeah.
every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that you have to like kind of remember what that version of yourself was like. You have to
You do.
remember that even if you kind of see the world differently now, like you're still fundamentally the same person that you
You are.
were back
Yeah.
then, and have a little grace for that younger version of yourself, because it can help you extend some grace to people who are kind of earlier on in that
Mhm.
process, or
Yep.
maybe going through it in a different way than you.
Yeah. Do you listen to Nickel Creek at all?
Sometimes, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen them live once
Sweet.
years ago, and they were
Okay.
amazing. Yeah.
They have a song on their last album. The album's called Celebrations. It's called I think it's Goddamn Saint is the name of it. And it's a story of Chris Steele. They toured with Toe the Wet Sprocket. And I saw Chris Steele do like a solo show, and he was telling the story of it, of like being backstage with their lead singer and being like, oh, this guy's totally going to hell. He doesn't believe in God at all. And it's our job as Nickel Creek to preach to him. And him basically now in his 40s being like, I know that's who I was back then. What the hell was I thinking? And like just the whole relationship of like going into a scenario and being like, I know the answer and clearly you're going to benefit from this answer. And then watching the other person look at you and be like, am I now? Huh, interesting.
Well, and the thing is, like, if you really do believe that, if you really do believe that other people are going to hell if they don't believe the way that you believe, kind of the only way to exist in the world that's a moral, like, good way to exist is to be constantly trying to convert everyone.
Yeah,
like, if
it
you
would be.
believe that everyone is going to be eternally suffering unless they
Yeah.
believe exactly what you believe, why are
Yeah.
you doing anything else ever?
It's your entire life. Yep.
And so like I have some, like, in some ways more respect for kind of like the zealous evangelist types than the types who are just kind of like shrugging their shoulders as they write everyone else off to eternal damnation.
Yeah, pretty much. I agree.
Anyway, that sounds like a great conversation for another podcast.
Well, hey, whenever you come out to Denver, if I end up back in Nashville, I'll let you know, and we'll discuss multiple things and aspects of life.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, hey, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. I'll release this on the 23rd. I'll email you about like, what do I need? Like pictures, all that good stuff. What all you want for it. That way it's in an email, not in an Instagram message. But dude, thank you so much. Thanks for writing a book.
Yeah. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you for letting me ask you questions about it and talk to you about it.
This was so much fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, man.
Perfect. I'll see you later and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care, man.
Perfect. See you, man. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Imperfect Dads Podcast. And make sure to give us 5 stars wherever you listen to us. Music, editing, and production is all done by me. Make sure to tune in on Mondays and most Thursdays for new episodes. This podcast is part of the Never a Face Network. Make sure to go to neverafacednetwork.com to learn more about them.